The first thing Caleb Turner noticed was the silence. On the Turner Ranch, silence around the south paddock never meant peace. It meant trouble. The wind usually carried the restless thud of hooves against wooden rails, the sharp, angry snort of a stallion that trusted no one and proved it daily. That horse, midnight black with a streak of white like a crack of lightning down his face, had sent 3 ranch hands to the infirmary in the past year. They called him Diablo, not because he was evil, but because no one could reach him. Caleb had raised him from a trembling colt after finding him beside his dead mare during a late spring storm. The colt had survived, the softness in him had not. Since then, Diablo had lived like a storm trapped in flesh, striking at every hand that dared to touch him. So when Caleb rode down the fence line that evening and heard nothing, no wood splintering, no iron shoes pounding dirt, his chest tightened. He dismounted quietly, boots sinking into red dust, and rounded the corner of the paddock expecting wreckage. Instead, he saw a girl standing inside the enclosure, her back to him, her fingers moving slowly through Diablo's mane, as if she were combing silk instead of fire. The stallion stood still, head lowered, eyes half closed. Caleb forgot how to breathe. She was slight, wearing a faded blue dress that brushed against worn leather boots. Her hair, the color of wheat just before harvest, fell loose down her back. There was nothing remarkable about her at first glance, no city polish, no ranch hand grit. Yet the way she stood beside Diablo made the world feel rearranged. Her touch was unhurried, certain. She didn't clutch or command. She listened with her palms. Diablo leaned into her like a wary traveler finally setting down his pack. Caleb felt something sharp twist in his chest. No one stepped into that paddock without permission. No one survived long enough inside it to grow comfortable. He pushed the gate open. Its hinges whining, the girl turned. Her eyes were gray, like rain about to fall. She did not flinch at the sight of him, though every ranch hand within 50 miles knew Caleb Turner's temper was nearly as unpredictable as his horse's. "You should be careful," he said, his voice low and rough. "He doesn't like strangers." She glanced at Diablo, her hand still resting against the stallion's neck. "He doesn't like fear," she replied softly, "but he knows I'm not afraid." Caleb had no answer for that. Her name was Elizahart, she told him, and she had come looking for work. The drought had swallowed her family's farm 2 counties east, and pride had driven her father to stubborn silence rather than charity. So Eliza had saddled the last horse they owned and ridden west at dawn 2 days ago. Caleb listened with guarded skepticism as she spoke, yet his eyes kept drifting to Diablo. The stallion followed her movements as if tethered by invisible thread. Caleb had spent years trying to earn even a fraction of that trust. He had whispered to the horse through winter nights, fed him by hand, endured bites and bruises without retaliation. He had sworn never to break Diablo's spirit the way other ranchers might. But patience had only earned him wary tolerance. What Eliza had found in a matter of minutes unsettled him. "How did you do it?" he finally asked, unable to keep the question caged. She shrugged lightly. "I didn't do anything. I let him see me." She explained how animals carried memories like scars, how they read breath and heartbeat faster than words. When she had entered the paddock, she had felt his tension ripple through the air. Instead of approaching head-on, she had turned sideways, lowering her gaze, breathing slow and steady until the rhythm between them matched. Caleb watched her as she spoke, wondering how someone so young spoke with the gravity of someone who had lost much more than crops. Word spread across the ranch before sunset. The hands gathered along the fence, whispering disbelief as Eliza brushed Diablo's coat until it gleamed like polished onyx. Caleb dismissed them sharply, protective instinct rising without explanation. He offered her a temporary position tending the horses, telling himself it was practical. Anyone who could calm Diablo was valuable. Yet practicality did not explain why he felt a reluctant flicker of hope stirring in a heart that had long ago resigned itself to dust and duty. That night, Caleb lay awake listening to the wind scrape against his window. He remembered the storm years ago when he had found Diablo alone and shivering beside his dead mother. He had recognized something of himself in that colt, both survivors, both angry at a world that had taken too much. Since his own father's death, Caleb had carried the ranch like a burden chained to his ribs. Trust was a luxury he could not afford. Yet as sleep finally crept over him, he saw again the image of Eliza, standing fearless in the paddock, her hand steady against the neck of a creature that trusted no one. And for the first time in years, he wondered if the ranch, and perhaps his guarded heart, had been waiting for someone different. The following days reshaped the rhythm of the Turner Ranch. Diablo began allowing a saddle to rest against his back, though only when Eliza's hands guided it. Caleb observed every step, wary of setbacks, but none came. Instead, The stallion's fury softened into something alert yet willing. Caleb found himself drawn to the paddock at dawn, pretending to inspect fences while secretly watching the quiet communion unfolding there. Eliza hummed old hymns under her breath as she worked, melodies that carried across open fields like threads stitching broken things together. She spoke little of herself, yet Caleb sensed grief behind her calm, an ache she carried without complaint. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the horizon, he approached her with unexpected candor. "He was the last thing my father gave me," Caleb admitted, resting his forearms on the fence. "Said a man's worth is measured by what he refuses to break." Eliza studied him thoughtfully. "Then you've done well," she said, "because he's not broken. He's healing." The word lingered between them. Healing. Caleb had never considered that possibility for Diablo or for himself. Over the next week, he dared to step closer while Eliza worked, allowing Diablo to grow accustomed to his presence beside hers. The first time the stallion accepted Caleb's touch without flattening his ears, something inside him shifted. It was not triumph he felt, but gratitude. One afternoon, clouds gathered thick and dark, threatening another violent storm. The ranch hands rushed to secure livestock. As thunder cracked overhead, a loose gate swung open near the creek. Diablo bolted toward it, panic flashing in his eyes at the rising wind. Caleb ran, heart hammering, but it was Eliza who reached the stallion first. She stood in his path, rain soaking her dress, and called his name with steady conviction. Diablo skidded to a halt inches from her. Caleb arrived breathless, stunned by the unwavering trust between them. Together, they guided the horse back to shelter. In that shared struggle against wind and fear, Caleb understood something undeniable. Eliza had not merely calmed Diablo. She had reminded both horse and cowboy that trust was not weakness but courage in its gentlest form. And as the storm raged around the barn, Caleb realized the girl by the fence was no accident. She was a turning point. Autumn crept across the plains in shades of amber and rust, and with it came change Caleb could no longer ignore. Diablo now carried a rider, Eliza first, then Caleb under her watchful gaze. The first time Caleb swung into the saddle, he expected resistance, a backward lunge or violent buck. Instead, the stallion shifted uncertainly but remained steady. Caleb felt the powerful muscles beneath him, alive yet restrained, and he understood the magnitude of what had been given back to him. It was not control, it was partnership. As they rode along the fence line, Eliza walking beside them, Caleb caught her smiling. The sight unsettled him more than any storm. He had grown accustomed to solitude, convincing himself it was strength. But her presence unraveled that belief thread by thread. Evenings found them talking on the porch steps, sharing stories beneath a sky crowded with stars. Eliza spoke of her mother's laughter before illness stole it, of her father's pride cracking under debt. Caleb spoke rarely of his own losses, yet with her he found words easier to reach. One night, a rider arrived bearing news that threatened to shatter the fragile peace forming on the ranch. A railroad company intended to purchase large stretches of neighboring land, including property bordering the Turner Ranch. Rumors suggested they would force sales through pressure and debt manipulation. Caleb felt anger ignite in his veins. The ranch was his inheritance, his responsibility. Losing even a portion could cripple them. Eliza listened quietly as he paced the porch, fists clenched. "You can fight," she said calmly, "but don't let anger choose your weapons." Her steady gaze anchored him. He realized then that her strength was not loud or defiant. It was rooted deep, like the cottonwoods by the creek that bent without breaking. Pressure mounted quickly. Representatives from the railroad arrived with polished boots and colder smiles, offering sums that sounded generous but carried ultimatums beneath them. Caleb refused outright, pride flaring. Yet drought had left scars on his finances, and he knew prolonged conflict could bleed him dry. The ranch hands sensed the tension, work grew strained. Even Diablo reacted to Caleb's unrest, tossing his head during rides. Eliza noticed before anyone. "He feels what you carry," she told Caleb after the stallion sidestepped nervously beneath him. "If you want him steady, you must be steady." Her words struck deeper than intended. That evening, Caleb walked alone to the paddock, leaning against the fence where he had first seen her. He admitted to himself what fear he had hidden, that he might fail the legacy entrusted to him. Moments later, Eliza joined him, silent but present. She did not offer solutions, only her hand resting lightly over his. The gesture, simple yet certain, steadied him more than any strategy. Together, they devised a plan. Instead of resisting blindly, Caleb would rally neighboring ranchers facing similar threats. Strength and unity might counter corporate pressure. Eliza wrote letters late into the night, her handwriting precise and hopeful. Meetings were held in barns and fields, voices rising but gradually aligning. Caleb discovered leadership not through intimidation, but through conviction. He spoke not just of land, but of heritage and dignity. Diablo, once a symbol of isolation, became emblematic of resilience. During a gathering demonstration ride, Caleb mounted the stallion before dozens of watching ranchers. Diablo moved with controlled power, every stride a testament to patience and trust restored. The crowd murmured in awe, inspired by what seemed impossible made real. Negotiations with the railroad shifted as alliances strengthened. Faced with unified landowners unwilling to fracture, the company adjusted its plans, rerouting tracks away from the Turner boundary. Victory did not arrive in a roar, but in a signed document and a collective exhale. On the evening the news spread, the ranch gathered for a modest celebration. Lanterns glowed against twilight, laughter rising freely for the first time in months. Caleb found Eliza near the paddock, Diablo's head resting lazily over the fence. "You changed everything," he told her, voice thick with emotion. She shook her head gently. "No, you just remembered who you were." He considered the truth of that. She had not imposed strength upon him, she had revealed it, the way she had revealed trust within Diablo. Under a sky painted with stars, Caleb realized the girl who had once stood alone in the paddock was no longer an outsider seeking work. She was woven into the ranch's future as surely as the fences and fields. Diablo nudged Eliza's shoulder and she laughed softly. Caleb reached for her hand, no longer hesitant. "Stay," he said, not as an employer, but as a man who understood that courage sometimes arrived quietly, brushing a restless horse beneath an open sky. Eliza met his gaze, gray eyes luminous with promise. "I was never planning to leave," she replied. And as the wind moved gently across the plains, Caleb knew that the greatest strength he had found was not in taming a wild stallion or defending his land, but in recognizing the rare and steady heart of someone different, the woman who had walked into a storm of distrust and answered it with grace.